WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. We Should Know is on the air again each and every Tuesday. We appreciate you being with us, and hopefully we're going through some information, education that maybe helps you better understand some things that goes on around you each and every day. This show comes to you from Star Communications, Channel 16, also simulcast on WCLN Radio, and there's also a run of this on Tuesdays and Thursdays that you can pick up on Channel 16 as well. We look forward to seeing you, and hopefully you're seeing us each and every week. And we also look forward to your comments at weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. Today we're talking about emergency medical response. We're talking with Erick Herring. Erick has got 30 plus years of experience altogether with volunteer. He is now the operations chief of emergency management right here in Sampson County, and a certified paramedic. Erick, thank you for taking time to be with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I want to kind of start out, I guess, with a kind of a big picture thing. You and I spent a lot of time just talking off camera before we came on the air about a lot of things that's been happening, going on in emergency management. Over the years, you and I both have seen an evolution occur in the expectation of on-site emergency treatment. When you started probably 30 plus years ago as a volunteer, it was a complete different world than now.
It was. When I started as a volunteer, I started out at the EMT basic level, and EMS in general is in its infancy as far as growing compared to fire or law enforcement. But over the last, I'd say 15, 20 years, we have actually really upped our game, so to speak, in Sampson County and moved from EMT basic level, advanced to the EMT intermediate level, up to our current level, which is the EMT paramedic level. Paramedic level being the highest pre-hospital care that can be provided in the state of North Carolina.
And I think the folks, as they listen to this, probably be good to just kind of speak a little bit to not only the training that's required to get there, but there's also protocols and training to just maintain that position. Is that correct?
There are. The state of North Carolina sets forth a standard set of protocols that we have to at least meet. Each agency can go in and tweak the protocols somewhat to their system and add some certain things to it. So every level, whether you're EMT intermediate level, advanced intermediate, or paramedic level, you have a certain set of guidelines that the state of North Carolina allows you to do and operate off of.
So, and I guess another way for me to kind of look at it, it doesn't matter if I'm in Raleigh or I'm in Greensboro or Charlotte or I'm in Sampson County near Keener or Turkey, North Carolina or Rollsboro. If a truck rolls up, there's a paramedic on that truck, I'm getting the same kind of care and emergency response if I were in a major city within 5 blocks of a hospital.
That is correct. Just little old rule, Sampson County, you're going to get the same paramedic level skill treatment sets that Wake County, Raleigh is, Charlotte. It's a standard set of skills across the state, so you're going to get the same standard treatment.
Do you think over time, Erick, how did that evolve? Because again, if we look back at your history, even 20 years ago or 25 years ago, especially if you look back 30 years ago, there was not even anything close to that, because when we look at the idea of the whole idea at that time was just to get somebody in a vehicle and rush them to the hospital. That's completely changed, hasn't it?
It has. I know back when I first started, you know, our goal was to see how quick we could get someone in the back of the ambulance, see how quick we could get them to the hospital for the emergency room physicians to start their treatment. Today, it's completely changed. At the paramedic level, we can do a lot of things that the emergency room physician can do as far as medications and skill sets. So we're going to spend that extra time on scene, go ahead and starting our treatment plan for the patients. We don't have to rush to get them to the hospital as fast now because we can start treatment. where used to 25, 30 years ago, there was not a lot of treatment that we could provide other than just basic life support measures. Now at paramedic level, we've got an array of medications and skills that we can go ahead and start treating our patients. So we'll sit on scene a lot longer now than what we used to get that treatment started.
I recall the terminology started shifting some years ago, and historically folks would say, quote, call the rescue squad. Well, the word rescue now seems to be more inclusive with, quote, fire service, because it implies you're retrieving somebody from a grain bin or from under a tractor or from under a car at a wreck. The medical piece has evolved somewhat in a different direction, and the expectation is there. Does that make sense?
It has. Rescue is pretty much defined as, like you said, getting someone out of a car that's been involved in a motor vehicle accident and they're pinned in, or a grain bin rescue operation, maybe a trench rescue operation, high-level rescue operation. EMS over the years has evolved where EMS used to perform those functions. Now we're seeing more and more of our fire departments performing those functions, and our EMS agencies are focusing more on just patient care. I know in Sampson County, predominantly our fire departments provide our vehicle extrication and do our rescue stuff. Sampson County EMS, the only thing that we do is patient care. We don't do any type of rescue functions.
So there's almost, for folks watching or listening to us today, there's almost an expectation that they need to start understanding that oftentimes that fire truck rolls up on the scene and they may be thinking, well, these guys are fixing to go in and start IV line or something, but that's not happening. They're basically there to get that person accessible to you guys when you roll up to be able to deal with it from a paramedic point of view.
That is correct. In a lot of situations, we have to work hand in hand with our fire partners. Whether it's a motor vehicle accident with someone pinned in and they're doing extrication, simultaneously we may go ahead and start treatment if we can gain access to the patient. But they are doing the extrication part. We will take over to the treatment part once we get the patient extricated. We are utilizing our fire departments a lot more nowadays in our cardiac arrest calls, where we're dispatching them and they're helping us do CPR. So it's been ever changing over the last 15, 20 years as we advance and try to stay ahead of the ball, so to speak.
When you look at challenges as operations chief and you look at challenges for rural areas and application of emergency medical care to folks, what are some of the challenges that maybe you see in a rural area that typically somebody, I don't know, in a Raleigh district or in a Greensboro district would probably not see? I know farm equipment's always been a big issue.
It is. Farm equipment's a big issue around here. I think we see a lot more farm machinery accidents than what somebody in Raleigh or Charlotte or Greensboro may see. They may see a lot more industrial type accidents. We do have industrial type accidents around in Sampson County because we do have industry here, but we have a lot of, I won't say a lot, but we do have some farm machinery accidents that they may not deal with quite as much as we deal with them.
And I think we've seen some of those over the years, as you were just talking about that. I'm having flashbacks of some folks that you and I both know that's ended up with some pretty devastating injuries that's changed their life over time.
We have. We actually had one of our employees involved in a farming accident that really hit home to a lot of us that were on scene that day, and changed his life forever. But glad to say that he's doing great now. Actually, he just stopped by our office one day this week and looking and doing great.
When you think about those kinds of accidents, and I'm sure you've been to a lot of them, what would you say to folks as they're listening to this show, or maybe they're going down the road and they turn the radio on, or they're sitting at home watching us? What would you say to them to kind of help prevent that and to be a little bit more cautious?
I think one thing is people just need to remain focused anytime we're doing something. around dangerous machinery or equipment. I think we all, myself included, get careless at times. We just let our guard down, and that's when an accident's going to happen. We just got to remain focused and vigilant and aware of what's going on and what we're doing.
Those kinds of accidents, do you find that they typically happen with machinery, or do you see some of those related to falls? I know we got a lot of grain bins and various other things that's going on in this county, and I've seen over the years, talk about agriculture, I've seen over the years this evolution in technology. You almost have to have a degree in computer science to operate some of these tractors. So that's changed radically too, has it not?
It has. I think the majority of the accidents we've seen are involving machinery. We have had over the years, had a couple of rescues from grain bins, but the majority of our farm-related accidents, I'll say, do involve heavy machinery, on the farms.
When you look at the hours of training, and one of the things you just mentioned a while ago that brought a conversation to mind, there's this idea that there is the person that's rescued, but then at the same time, there's folks that are in situations that you may have to go in and actually get to that person because you can't move them, or they can't move them from that dangerous location. Is that troublesome to you guys as well?
It is, but all of our departments that are rescue technicians, they have had some emergency care training, so they are familiar of how they need to operate as far as moving the patient, getting the patient out. Even if they go in, they know how to handle and manage the patient to not do any more harm to them as far as getting them out and bringing them to us.
We're going to take our first break, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit about some of these things that a lot of folks have seen as some of the #1 diseases and how you respond to those. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Erick Herring. He's the Operations Chief for Emergency Management here, a well-trained paramedic, over 30 years of service to you in the community. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on there. I want to thank you for being with us again today. As we come to you, we're talking about a subject that it has been, I think, discussed, and you've heard this about it or that about it, but we're talking to the guy that knows what's going on as it relates to emergency medical response right here in this area. He's Chief of Operations for Sampson County Emergency Management, Erick Herring. Erick, over 30 years of service. You're a very well-trained paramedic. I'm sure you've taught a number of classes in the area. One of the things that I keep reading that seems to be part of the literature, and as best I can determine here, some of the sources I've looked at, still classifies heart disease as one of the major killers of people in the United States as a whole. Is heart disease an issue that you've seen a lot of response over your career?
It is. Heart disease is one of the main issues that we have to deal with in EMS. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the lifestyles that we live. A lot of us are just on the go and busy all the time. We're eating out all the time. We're not eating healthy. We're eating fast foods. So that contributes to the heart disease. But in EMS, we have seen a number of changes over the years to help not necessarily combat the heart disease, but to treatment of it and the effects of heart disease, treatment of our heart attack patients. Some of our heart attack patients, if we pick someone up that we recognize as having a heart attack, we're going to take them straight to a cath lab. We have been able to show through studies, and when I say we, I mean across the nation, nationwide, we've been able to show through studies that the quicker we can get someone to a cath lab that is having a heart attack, the better off they're going to be. The better off the quicker they will hopefully get discharged from the hospital, neurologically intact, with no deficits.
When we hear the word cath lab, I first think about catheterization and all that kind of thing. Is that something that typically small rural hospitals does not have access to, so you have to transport, for us, you would have to transport out of the area?
That is correct. Our locally hospitals, they do not have cath labs. Our 3 hospitals surrounding us, our closest hospitals with cath labs, are Wake Med, Cape Fear Valley, and New Hanover. So we'll take a patient from right here in Sampson County that we pick up and identify as having a heart attack, even though it may take 45, 50 minutes to drive them to Wake Med or Cape Fear Valley or New Hanover versus the 5 or 10 minute trip across town to Sampson Regional or to Betsy Johnson. We're going to take them straight to that cath lab. We've been able to show through studies that the patient, that is what the ultimate goal is for the patient, is to get them into that cath lab. Our actual goal statewide is to get someone to a cath lab within 90 minutes of the time of them dialing 911. Our problem is if we take them to our local hospitals, then they have to get on the phone with a catheterization hospital, and they have to get a physician to accept them first. And then once they get accepted, then that hospital will have to send a truck down to our local hospital to pick the patient up and get them back to the hospital where the cath lab is at. So you're talking, that could be a 4, 5, 6, 8 hour or more delay in getting the patient to the definitive care that they actually need.
And one of the things that I recall reading was about this kind of a golden hour or a certain specific period of time. The more you can get that patient to the specific area that folks can treat them, that increases their likelihood of not only continuing to live, but having a better recovery and so forth.
It does, and we refer to the golden hour a lot with our trauma patients. We want to get them to a trauma center within the golden hour of the time of an accident happening. That's hard to do a lot of times, but we utilize air transport a lot for that. We transport by ground, just depending on the location we're at. But the quicker that we can get them to that trauma center or the cath lab, and hopefully get them there within that golden hour or within the 90-minute threshold to the cath lab, the better off we've been able to prove that the patient is going to be, and potentially shorten their stay in the hospital. So that's one of the big things that we try to do, is get them to where they need to be as quick as possible.
It kind of talked to us a little bit about what a trauma center is versus just an emergency room. A lot of folks will say, well, just get me to the ER. It don't matter where it is. There's a significant difference from looking at it from where you sit, I would think, in what the availability of care is and all those kinds of things.
Right, there is. Our local hospitals, like Sampson Regional, Betsy Johnson, Vidant Duplin, they do not have trauma surgeons. They do not have neurosurgery, things of that nature. So they're able to stabilize patients as best they can, but the ultimate goal for them is going to be to get them to a trauma center. At trauma centers, when we take a patient in to a trauma center that's been involved in a motor vehicle accident, there's a team of doctors that come in, trauma surgeons, neurosurgery, whatever the case may be, and just flock to the patient and start treatment immediately on that patient. So our local hospitals, if you need neurosurgery, our local hospitals can't take care of that. So the quicker we can get you to that neurosurgeon, the better off you're going to be.
And sometimes, talk to us a little bit about this whole process, because oftentimes I've heard people say, well, and you mentioned it a while ago, the medical people, and a lot of times they'll say rescue squad. The rescue squad got there, but I bet they sat there for 30 minutes and they didn't go anywhere. The expectation is, as you talked about a while ago, is just to pick that person up and immediately, scat out to a hospital. But you guys are actually doing now what used to be, probably when you started your career, would have been done by a doctor in the ER, but you're actually doing a lot of that in the back of that truck, correct?
We are. After we advance to the paramedic level, a lot of the medications that we administer in the field are the exact same medications that you're going to administer in the emergency room. So we can go ahead and start a lot of our treatments, go ahead and get it started. I know our cardiac arrest patients used to, when I first started, we got to someone that was in cardiac arrest, we tried to see just how quick we could get them in the back of the ambulance and see how quick we could get them to the hospital, because we were at the EMT level and we couldn't give any medications to them. But now we can give the same medications that the emergency room physician is going to give to a cardiac arrest patient. We essentially followed the same treatment protocol that the emergency room physician is going to follow for a cardiac arrest patient. So that's why we may sit on the scene 20, 30 minutes working that cardiac arrest and never load it up and go to the hospital. And that's another thing that through studies we've been able to show, that we do a better job, more effective CPR by sitting on scene and focusing on the job that we're doing versus trying to do that job riding down the road, running 65, 70 miles per hour down the road. We're not able to do as good a quality CPR if we're in the back of a moving vehicle as we are if we're sitting still with the patient on the floor. We really put a lot of focus and emphasis on the high quality CPR.
When you mentioned cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, been around a long time. A lot of people's heard that word. Some folks will say, well, I went through that training back in 1980 or 85 or 90. The training of what you're supposed to do protocol-wise related to CPR, has that changed over the years?
CPR changes. American Heart Association comes out every 5 years with updates to CPR. Some years there's more significant changes than others. Right now, a lot of our pre-hospital, not for EMS, but layperson CPR, is just hands only. Just you doing compressions. Through science and studies, excuse me, they've been able to show that the biggest benefit for that patient that went into sudden cardiac arrest is to get that blood circulating. The blood is already oxygenated, so we want to get it circulating throughout the body. So we're doing hands-only CPR for our lay personnel. And I would recommend that anybody that has never taken a CPR class to please take a CPR class.
Or at least get refreshed.
Exactly. Because early defibrillation and CPR is the key to sudden cardiac arrest survival. And even if someone does not know CPR, they call 911. Our 911 dispatchers are trained to walk them through the CPR process and tell them how to do CPR and exactly what they need to do. So that brings up another topic. When people call 911, our 911 center is going to ask a lot of questions. A lot of people get aggravated at that because they think, well, just go ahead and send the truck and get the ambulance out here. What they don't understand is while one person's on the phone with you asking you these questions, somebody else is already dispatching the ambulance or the fire truck or the law enforcement officer. But by them asking the questions, they get a better understanding of the picture of what's going on scene. They're able to relay that information to us, which in turn helps us go ahead and start getting in our mind what we're going to need to do when we get on scene. Also, the 911 center can tell the caller things to do to start helping the patient prior to us getting there.
This is, I think, one of those areas that you just tapped into that a lot of people not only get frustrated with, but nobody's really ever explained it like you're doing. And what I'd like to do is, we're going to take a break in about 20 or 30 seconds here, but when we come back from that break, I want to kind of let folks know, I'd like to ask you to just kind of walk us through a typical call, and so they can understand what's going on in the background versus what they're seeing, because oftentimes they're just simply in panic. So when we come back, let's talk about that and walk them through a scene of that nature, if you don't mind. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Caller friend, we're talking about life-saving issues for you, your family, and friends. These are critical things you need to know. We'll be back in a moment.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that adds a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody try to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for being with us today. Remember, you can reach us via email at weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. If you want to drop us a card or a note to say, hey, you should look at this show. Here's a guest I'd like for you to consider. You can send that to Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. We should know Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. We like to get that information. We also like to hear from you about shows we've had in the past, and I do appreciate your continued input as it relates to ag shows and others that we've had, which I get a lot of comments on. Today we're talking about something that's literally life and death, and we're talking with Erick Herring, who is the operations chief for emergency management, a paramedic here, 30+ years of service. One of the things we tapped on just before we went to break, Erick, and I think you nailed it, is that a lot of folks, including me, I guess, sometimes don't understand that the sophistication of the phone call that goes to emergency management operations is so much different than what it used to be. And when I say used to be, obviously several decades ago, it's changed not only in the sense of what that call does, but how it's processed. You hit on a point that people has said, and probably I've even thought over time, just send somebody out here, I need them right now. And that gets confusing. Help us understand that call comes in. What happens with that call?
When someone dials 911, our 911 operators are going to go through a series of questions. Number one, they're going to verify your location, your phone number, and when you dial 911 from a landline telephone, that information will populate on their computer screen. However, all of that information is put in manually by humans, so there is the risk for error. So they're going to verify it. They want to know your address, your name, your telephone number, in case something were happening, they need to contact you back. But after that, they're going to go into what's wrong with the patient. They're going to start asking you a series of medical questions for them to try to determine what's wrong. Once they can get that determined, they're going to go ahead and another operator is going to go ahead and dispatch our EMS unit or a fire truck or a law enforcement officer. So you've got people that's working in the background. A lot of people get confused and they're thinking, well, just go ahead and send a truck. They get aggravated with all the questions being asked. But what they don't realize is that they've already sent the truck. They're already dispatching us. But by our 911 center asking those questions, it helps them to get a better picture of what is going on scene. They can relay that information to us or to law enforcement or to the fire department, and as we're responding, we can go ahead and be getting a game plan in our mind is, okay, what is going on? What are we fixing to walk into? How are we going to be able to treat this patient, or what's our best course of action, so to speak? But likewise, by them asking those questions, depending on the situation, they may be able to start telling you something to do that you can start helping the patient out prior to us getting there. Especially our cardiac arrest patients. If someone's in cardiac arrest, they can walk you through the steps of CPR. Childbirthing, if you call someone's having a baby, they can walk you through the steps of delivering that baby. It may be hemorrhage control. They can walk you through the steps of controlling hemorrhage on somebody.
That's unheard of 20, 30 years ago. You never would have imagined that.
20, 30 years ago, you called 911, they just get your address and a phone number to call you back, and they say, okay, we'll have a unit on the way, and they would just send us. So now they're able to help get that patient care started you as the caller can start that patient care, and they're able to tell you what to do, how to do it, and get that patient care started way before we can ever get there on the ambulance.
So average response time is what in the county? I know in some areas may be a little longer than others, but typically
our average countywide response time is about 10.5 to 11 minutes. I would personally would like to see it a little bit lower than that, but we are geographically largest county in the state, so it's it takes a while to get to some of our callers.
And I think that the reason I asked that question because what you were just explaining about things that you can do, especially as it relates to CPR, could be determine whether that person lives or not. Because if it's your uncle, your father, mother, sister, brother, whoever it may be, or somebody you don't even know. If you don't even know CPR, and I'm just sitting here thinking as you're saying that, it seems to me that if somebody can say to you, okay, here's what you need to do, calm down, do the following, if you're willing to do that and follow that protocol, even for 5 minutes, is it that critical that you could save somebody's life?
You very well could save somebody's life. The quicker that we can get someone doing CPR on somebody, the better chances that person has for survival. It could be something as simple as you've got a bad laceration on your arm, arterial bleed, and you're sitting there bleeding and just spurting out blood. If we don't get that bleed stopped, you may end up and go into cardiac arrest yourself just from the hemorrhage control or lack of hemorrhage control, loss of blood. So by our 911 center being able to tell someone what to do to stop that hemorrhaging on you could ultimately save your life. Sometimes it's the little things.
Yeah, as operations chief, you see both sides of that too. I mean, you see it from the dispatch side as well as how it looks when you get there. When you roll up on that scene, or some of the folks that work with you out there, if they roll up on that scene, does the dispatcher say, look, so and so's already started CPR, or we give them so and so? So you know that before you get there.
We know that before we get there. One of our like our chest pain calls. If you call in and someone's having chest pain, our dispatcher is going to go through a series of questions. They're going to ask you, they're going to find out if the patient has already had an aspirin or if they're allergic to aspirin. If they have not, they're going to instruct you to go ahead and get an aspirin and give to that patient. That's one of the first things we're going to do when we get there. But if you can go ahead and someone on scene can give it to you 5 or 10 minutes ahead of what we can give it to you, they're going to instruct you that does the patient have nitroglycerin? Do they have a prescription for nitroglycerin? Do they take nitroglycerin? They instruct you in helping administer that nitroglycerin to the patient. So a lot of those things, the quicker we can get it started, the better off the patient's going to be.
And I think we've mentioned that February, of course, the month of February has been. And this show is airing kind of late in February, but February is American Heart Month, and people have been talked about this. They've heard folks mention it, but some of the details that we're getting now, does this kind of procedure pretty much apply to all emergency response areas in the state, or is it unique to certain locations? Does dispatchers, say in another county, have that same capacity to do what you're talking about?
There may be a couple of our smaller counties throughout the state that may not be at that level yet, but predominantly all of our 911 centers across the state are at that level where they're going to EMD the call. Emergency medical dispatch is what the EMD is, and can provide the directions and instructions for what you can do to help the patient and what you don't need to do to harm the patient any further.
When I think about this, I want to spend just a little time on that, again, back to that initial phone call. So it may not be a heart attack issue. It may present itself as a heart attack issue, but it could be something else going on with that person that involves, I don't know, a stroke or something of that nature. So people will probably be listening. They'll say, well, I don't know. I wish I could say to Erick Herring, say, look, Chief, I don't want to do that because I might make it worse. How do you respond to a person who says, I don't want to make it worse, I might not do it right?
If you call 911 and if there's something that you don't feel comfortable with doing, they're not going to force you or pressure you into doing such. you know, if someone's in cardiac arrest, they're going to ask you, do you want to perform CPR? And if you tell them yes, they will walk you through it. But they're not going to pressure you into doing it. But you know, and some of the questions that they may ask will help identify what is going on with the patient. You may just call, you may just think someone's sick or not feeling right, and call 911 for them. And through the series of questions that they may ask, they may determine and identify that, hey, this person's having a stroke, which is a significant difference to us versus going to someone that's just sick and not feeling well. You know, so knowing that up front, it really changes how we're going to operate and function as far as going to the call and after we get to the call.
And that person that, and again, I'm spending time on this because according to the statistics, heart disease and heart attacks is still at the top of the list of what kills people. So as we spend time on that and think about it, from your perspective, if that is done and a person says, historically, and this just comes to mind, I guess I've been around this stuff for so long, but one of the things I always disturb folks is they would say, well, I don't want to do CPR, and the number one thing they would say is because I don't want to have to blow in that person, and that requires skin contact, and what if they have a disease? So you said a while ago, that's not in the picture anymore.
That is
so
not.
So that cannot be used as an excuse.
Right, you're exactly right. CPR now, layperson CPR, they're just going to have you do compressions, just hands on the chest and hard, fast compressions.
And not worry so much about if you're doing it, pressing too hard, just those compressions alone could be the fundamental difference when you get there, whether you get that person to a trauma center and they're still breathing. That's literally what we're talking about.
Yes, it could mean the difference. We have actually had 3 cardiac arrest saves within the last few months where the patients have, they went into cardiac arrest, and one of them, I think, was on scene prior to our ambulance getting there, was in cardiac arrest. Our ambulance got there, continued CPR, and was able to get a return of circulation, and we got them transferred to hospitals, and they've been able to walk out of the hospital neurologically intact with no deficits.
Amazing, amazing. We're going to take another break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with Erick Herring, the Operations Chief for Emergency Management here in Sampson County, about some things that you probably know a little bit about, but maybe getting a little more in depth what you can do to help out. We'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us. We're coming up on the last segment of We Should Know. We're talking about medical issues that may impact your life personally, or a friend, or you might just come up on the scene and all of a sudden discover you're involved in the need for being aware of what's going on around you. It relates to emergency medical issues, and no one that I know can talk better about that than Erick Herring, the paramedic, operations chief right here in Sampson County. Erick, thank you for taking your time out of your schedule to come in and talk to everybody today about a subject that sometimes you just get involved in, and you won't expect them to do that when you left the house. It could be you that needs assistance. So we've talked about cardiovascular issues. I know one of the things that's been discussed over the past couple of years, it's been a major medical issue, is the opioid crisis. And of course, anything that you can tell us about how you guys are preparing, and I'll kind of toss both of these out at the same time, how you guys are being prepared for this whole issue of transmission of diseases, one of which we've talked about and the media's covered rampantly, coming from China. This particular virus appears to be something that is scary to everybody, but start with the opioid thing and let's transition to that, because I know you've looked at that and probably had some training on it.
Yeah, opioid narcotic overdoses is a major issue that that we see not only in the state of North Carolina, but right here in little old Sampson County. a lot of people don't want to believe that there is a drug crisis going on in Sampson County, Clinton, little small, nice towns. A lot of people want to think that it's the larger cities, Raleigh, Charlotte, Greensboro. It's right here in our local communities. So one of the things that within the last couple of years that we've actually started doing to help combat that problem is our law enforcement partners have Narcan on their vehicles. Narcan is the medication that we're going to administer to combat the respiratory depression of the narcotic overdose. And what happens if we have a narcotic overdose, we don't know what's going on that scene, so our law enforcement partners they're dispatched and they respond initially to ensure that the scene is safe before we go in. So they may be on scene, a few minutes before we get there. If someone's not breathing, they can administer the Narcan to reverse the effects of the narcotic overdose. And we've actually, over the last several years, we've administered Narcan numerous times in the field through EMS and saved lives because of it.
Is that a pen that, is it like a little needle, and do you have to go through a short protocol before you administer to make sure you're dealing with that? Because I think a lot of people don't understand there's certain, again, protocols that even law enforcement people need to look at certain things before they move.
They do. Law enforcement has had training in the Narcan, and the Narcan that our law enforcement partners utilize is a nasal inhalation. It's basically kind of like an Afrin bottle, nasal spray. It's a metered dose, the correct amount, and you just put it in someone's nostril and squirt it, and it's absorbed through the membranes, and that's how the medication works. But our law enforcement partners, they've all had training in it, so there's really no, with Narcan, if you give someone Narcan that's not necessarily overdosed on narcotics, you're not going to hurt them.
Right.
So it's a real safe drug, but it's a real potent drug for our narcotic overdoses.
So basically, somebody comes upon a person and they are there and they check for breathing and that kind of thing. There's no breath, and their hands obviously not turning purple or something. Their rigor mortis hadn't set in. If they use Narcan, the cases are revealing that actually brings that person back to life, so to speak.
It does. What we do is, or in a narcotic overdose, it slows respiration rates down, depresses the respiratory drive on a person. It'll eventually depress it to the point of no respirations at all. So if that person is overdosed and we administer the Narcan, it combats the narcotic, so in turn, the respiratory rate and drive will start to increase and go back up, and the patient will start back breathing again. We've actually had, over the last year, I'd say, just at our main EMS office here in Clinton, we've had 3 different patients or 3 different vehicles pull up with patients in them that had overdosed on some type of narcotic that were not breathing, where they pull up to our front door and go to banging on the door, blowing the horn, and patients in the back of the car, the front of the car, not breathing.
And these are private vehicles that pull up with people that...
Exactly.
Wow. And that says to me unbelievable amount of fortitude for somebody to carry somebody to get them there, but they come to you because they know that they can get help there as quick as they could get it. Probably
they're riding down the road or wherever they're at, and whoever it is with them, they're shooting up, doing the.
And they fall over.
And then they notice in 2 or 3 minutes that, hey, they're not breathing. So luckily they're close, or luckily for those 3, they were close enough by our office that they just drove up and pulled up at our office, and we were able to get to them and go to bagging them and administer Narcan and ultimately revive them.
And Erick, as you're talking about a lot of these things, there's probably some folks out there that probably say, well, everybody kind of knows this, but I got the feeling there's people out there listening to you today or watching you today, and they're thinking, oh my God, I didn't realize it was that bad. But it is that bad, isn't it?
It is. I tell people all the time that you would be amazed at what is within a 1 mile or 2 mile radius of your house. You know, I think if you'll talk to any law enforcement or EMS personnel, they can tell you, you know, there's drugs everywhere. There's, you know, child abuse everywhere. Just all kinds of things that, you know, and like I said, I tell people a lot that you'd really be amazed at just what's within a 1 mile radius of your house, that most of us that are not in emergency service are just oblivious as to what's going on and don't understand and realize. They think that they're, you know, my road, it's a nice little road, you know, nice quiet little neighborhood. You know, and we're just oblivious to what's going on if you're not in emergency services. And
I think one of the things I heard this comment or read it somewhere a while back where it says that typically we all live in our own little bubble, and as long as that bubble is not invaded, we stay in that bubble. But what you just explained is that with the emergency response folks, whether it's paramedics or fire, law enforcement, you literally can't stay in that bubble because you're thrust right in the middle of it.
We're going into people's houses and we're seeing everything. You know, the good, the bad, the ugly. We see it all, and we see it every day. You know, so it's like I said, a lot of people just don't realize what's going on around them.
So with that said, I think it's a perfect transition. One of the things that we've seen just enamored on the news media recently, especially the national news and even local news, is this whole issue of infectious disease that supposedly is coming in from China, and we heard the word epidemic. We've heard some very horrific possibilities, and you know, it's like, you know, we see what's happening with the flu, and now this other kind of thing. Tell us about how we should look at that and what we're prepared, i.e., we meaning you guys, what you're prepared to do to deal with that kind of thing.
Well, one thing that we're working on currently is we're in the process of getting some EMD questions for our 911 dispatch center. We've actually already got the protocol in place. Actually, not in place, but we've got a protocol that we're working on getting in place for our 911 center, that they can ask a series of questions to help determine that, okay, are we dealing with the coronavirus, or you know, and if they are, they're able to warn us that, hey, this is a potential, this may be something that we're dealing with, so we're able to take precautions more so than what we normally would. You know, and I think I've not actually looked at the reports the last couple of days. I've not seen a report, but I think, to my understanding, there's been no confirmed cases in the state of North Carolina as of yet, and I think there's only been 15 confirmed cases nationwide so far. But we're hoping and praying that it does not get to Sampson County. But if it does, we hope we're able to identify it and do some things to help mitigate the spread of it.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets back to the comment about kind of living in that bubble. It's kind of proof and point that you can't live in a bubble no matter how much you think you have yourself isolated. If these kinds of things become rampant, then it could change everything we do procedurally and otherwise.
It could, it very well could. I know, you know, several years ago when the Ebola scare was ongoing, we, with EMS, I mean, we even went out and purchased the rubber boots, the respirators, the Tyvek gowns. You know, we had to do some things to really get prepared for that. You know, but thankfully it never got to that point here, but we were prepared for it.
And I think that's the thing too that you just pointed out that folks need to understand, is that you're constantly looking at the what ifs, and you're constantly preparing for that, and equipment wise and otherwise. Even, and the hope is it never happens, but if it does, the prep for it is there, and you've been prepared and have the capability to respond to it, and the resources to call in if necessary.
Exactly. We're forever trying to stay ahead of the curve, so to speak, in all things of that nature.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for taking your time again to be with us. And we appreciate the service that you and your colleagues render to the county. And again, ask folks to be understanding when they dial that 911 number. Thank you, Eric, for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you again next week as we bring you another show, things you may be interested in. Enjoy having your comments. And again, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.